Good morning, everyone. We have the habit in Palo Alto of welcoming people later when the announcements are made. But today I'm going to break that habit and say welcome to everybody because we have a lot of guests here from Ananda Village. And it's really quite special having you here. I literally feel your presence. So that's true for everybody, but I'm particularly happy to have our guests down here. This reading this morning, like every reading throughout the year, has really one message in it. There's always one teaching that comes through every one of these readings, and it's basically a message for us to wake up. That's what it really is. It's a message, one way or another, that Swamiji writes to invite us to remember who we really are, that we are one with God, that to wake up really in essence from this dream world that He's created, where we live in duality, where we live very much looking out for our pleasure, for that which will satisfy us, make us feel whole, and to remember that we are the soul, not the body. And that's in every one of these readings. Yesterday I was thinking to myself, it takes a true master like Paramhansa Yogananda or Swami Kriyananda to be able to teach for all of the years that they taught, how many lectures they gave, really about the same truth, and always make it feel like we're hearing something new and interesting and wonderful. It's a challenge because in essence, that is what every one of these readings are about. It's just saying, remember that you're the soul, not the body. Wake up to that realization. That's what it is. Now, there are many ways that we could talk about this reading today. Swamiji lifted it up by the thread of ahimsa, really, nonviolence, and I want to talk a little bit about that. There's also that overlying or underlying theme of oneness. And although I'm never quite sure where these talks are going to go, I hope to be able to bring them together. When I read this reading for the first time a few days ago, this story came to mind that happened a long time ago, so I may have some of the facts wrong. It dawned on me, I must be very old because this was half of my lifetime ago, and it felt like I was studying ancient history when I was trying to remember the story. But it was when we, Ananda Palo Alto, had our house in Atherton. So somebody else might remember, but that was at least the early 80s. And I was over there one night when Swamiji came, and he had just put together a slideshow. And this is what I can't remember what the slideshow was about, but it's irrelevant to the story. There was a woman who was very involved in Ananda who I found, now remember, I'm going to excuse myself first. This was probably 35 years ago. I always was thinking how physically unattractive she was. I was holding that thought all the time. She was very active down here, and I would see her often. But I would just be every time I looked at her, that's what I saw. And she was actually a wonderful teacher and a very great soul, but that's where my head was. And during the slideshow, her picture came up a few times. And at one point, Swamiji just stopped the slideshow, and he said from such a deep place, "Doesn't she just look beautiful here?" And he stopped me, in my mind, because my mind was where it had always been when I was looking at pictures of this woman. And I looked at her. And of course, Swamiji was speaking to something that was so profound. He was speaking to her about her soul. But when I looked at her now, I saw how beautiful she was. And every time after that I had anything to do with this woman, I found her to be very beautiful. And it was such a profound lesson. I mean, just think, I read this reading yesterday, and it took me right back there. Now, in truth, I've thought of it many, many times. But as soon as I changed my mind, and I was no longer holding this negative, and what I really came to see was a somewhat violent thought about this woman, everything for me changed in my relationship with that woman. Not only did I see her differently, but our relationship changed. We were working together more easily. There was just, not surprisingly, just a huge amount of love that started flowing between us. We ultimately became very good friends. Now, that of course was not the only time that I had held a negative thought about somebody. But I want to bring this out for us today because it is essential for us to understand how we grow spiritually, that we have to keep remembering that thoughts are actions. They are no less of an action than any action that we take. Swamiji talks in the reading about if you kill somebody. Well, we don't have to kill people. We can kill people or kill energy, certainly do them harm with our thoughts, but we're also doing ourselves so much harm. Just think about what those negative thoughts do to us. Everybody is here this morning because we're wanting to grow spiritually. We're yogis. Every one of us are yogis. And we have so many negative thoughts. I remember hearing, I don't know the number, about how many thoughts we have per minute. And it turned out to be, if not thousands, it was more than 1,000. I remember that. And a tiny little percentage of them are positive. They've actually studied this. So here we are walking around completely unaware most of the time of how much negativity is flowing through us. And here we are trying to focus on ahimsa, the lack of violence. So it doesn't need to be a physical act. Every time we're judging somebody, as I was, every time we're jealous of somebody, every time we feel greedy or we wish somebody harm in any way, and it's so subtle. You know how Maya is that? I imagine we all know, maybe I'm the only one who's had that experience, but you find yourself in these places, and all of a sudden you would say, why am I thinking that? How could I be there? How could I let those thoughts, what would be motivating it? But yesterday it dawned on me what that is doing to me as I'm moving down this spiritual path. Last night we had our Kriya initiation and review here, and it was profound and lovely, as it always is. But either David or Asha said as they were speaking that Kriya, but even for those of you who don't have Kriya, this is as true of any form of meditation. In fact, a lot of what we say about Kriya is true for every form of meditation. So there's so much that was said and felt last night that's applicable to all of us. But it really is just about finding a way to change our energy, because that's what we need to do. We're yogis. We have a negative thought. In fact, we now know through these studies, we have many of them. And what happens to that negativity? It gets lodged in our spine, not in our anatomical spine, but in our astral spine. And it stays there. When Master talked about thwarting cross currents of ego, which is a phrase that he used that's now been repeated over and over. Probably most of you have heard it. What was he referring to? He was referring to this. He's referring, because this is ego. What else would have us have a negative thought? Why would I have spent even a moment thinking about how that woman looked? What would have brought that? Thwarting cross currents of ego. that get into our astral spine, our spiritual core, and disallow that energy from rising, from expanding, from moving up and out because they're thwarting cross currents. I remember I heard someone years ago, we've all heard this in many ways, but this has stuck with me all these years. She said, holding a grudge or a negative thought about somebody is like taking poison and hoping the other person dies. And it's just so perfect. And that is what we're doing every time we hold on to these thoughts. Our job as yogis, as spiritual aspirants, is really to transform all of that energy, all of it, into a place of harmony, to let it become harmonious. That's what we need to do every time we find ourselves holding any of that negativity, because it is the only way, really, it's the only way that we can actually be in our spine, be centered, be what we want to be, have the things that we all think we want to have. We cannot be behaving in ways that are mutually exclusive to that which is harmonious, to that which is centered, to that which becomes love for us, and then think that we're going to know love, know God, experience joy. It is virtually impossible. And we have to remember, again, thoughts are action. This whole world is nothing but God's thoughts. We all know that. Thoughts put in vibration become this material world. So every thought matters. Last year I was visiting Bharat up at the village. Most of you know him, but he's a naturalist, and he's spent his whole life really studying the natural environment, nature, and he's written a couple of wonderful books about it and done much more. That's not what's important here, but do read his books if you haven't. But at the time, he was reading a book, I think it was called Elephant Whisperers, but I could be wrong and confusing it with Horse Whisperers, but I'm pretty sure it was called Elephant Whisperers. And it was written by a man who had a, what do you call them in Africa? Not a retreat, but a huge piece of land. Anyway, whatever their, a nature preserve, thank you, that's what he had, in Zululand. And he said that in this book, he wrote that he saw all the time that the animals were picking up people's thoughts. He said there could be herds of rhinoceros around, and then they would plan the next day to go out and dart a rhinoceros to study it, and they could never find a rhinoceros. They'd be planning one night, and the next day, they would all be gone. He said there was a man who came to see him, a hunter, and he gave this man permission to take down one impala. And he said, but he told him it had to be from a bachelor herd. He didn't want him taking the impala from a herd where, and I don't know what that's called in impala language, but when he was with his women, his ladies, his harem. And he said the herds, the bachelor herds had been everywhere. But he told this man, you can go out tomorrow and you can hunt, but it's got to be from a bachelor herd. They were nowhere to be found. Now, what is that when you think about how powerful that is, that the animals are picking up our thoughts? When you realize how much thought, how much power is in every thought, how much of an ability to literally change ourselves, never mind the whole world. It really makes you want to change your mind. It dawned on me that peace and harmony prayer that so many of us have talked about, that Anandi shared with us up at the village, where we hold somebody in our mind's eye. Lord, hold this person in peace and harmony. Let them feel peace and harmony over and over. Peace and harmony. No wonder there are miracles that can happen through that practice. I was just thinking as I was sitting in there, it came to me about my medical practice, and I've told you all so many stories. I'm not going to tell a story today, but I realized, why do so many people feel well after they've come to see me? Why is that? Why is it that somebody could have the third largest practice in the United States? There's a reason for that. And I've already told you over and over, it's not because I know more medicine than most internists. But I thought, when people walk into my office, I am certain that they can be well. I'm certain of it. Because remember, wellness does not have to do with how we are physically. It's a state of mind. It's an attitude. So I have no doubt that everybody can be well. And they get that. And they feel so good coming in there where somebody believes in them, where they're seen and held in a positive light. I don't have to say those words to them. I just have to be that. And imagine the power that we all have to help each other become who it is we want to be, simply by holding people here rather than here, by thinking good thoughts rather than negative thoughts, by seeing what is right about each other rather than finding ourselves seeing what is wrong. We have so much power to do so many great things in this life. Now, the reason that the whole idea of thought matters, other than that everything is a thought put into vibration, is because what we're looking at today in this reading is we're talking about the difference between deeds and intentions, or, if not the difference, what do they have to do with each other? Intentions really are our thoughts, and they matter a great deal. In some ways, they matter more than what we actually accomplish. I remember hearing Ananda say one time, he said, most of us do not have an opportunity to do great things for Master all the time. It's not what most of us are doing. I mean, look around you. If we think what it took to bring this Sunday service to bear today, how many people who vacuumed the rug, who put the chairs in order, who does the sound, the lighting, the chanters, the scheduling of it all. It's these little things that we do every day that wind up coming together into this great whole. And as long as we can hold in our mind that we're doing it out of love, to love somebody, to help somebody feel better, to serve somebody. You remember the story in the autobiography, or in the Path, where Swami talks about another monk who got irritated one day and who said, I didn't come here to dig holes. And you want to say to him, oh, yes, you did. There's that wonderful, wonderful story about the man who came to his guru, and his guru asked him to just chop wood to keep the fires going. Just chop wood to keep the fires going. And he did it, and he did it with such love and devotion because his guru asked him to do it. He never had a thought about how much time he was doing it or what else he could be doing. It's not like, oh, I only get to chop wood and everybody else gets to whatever. He simply chopped the wood with great devotion as a service to his guru. But one day a piece of his hair got stuck in the wood, and he noticed that it was gray. And he went to the pond and he looked, and he found himself to be an old man. And he felt so sad. And he went to his guru and he said, look at me, I've become an old man. And he started to cry. And his guru reached out and caught the tear And he said, if one as great as you, if a tear from one as great as you hits the ground, it would be a terrible disservice. And at that point, he touched him, and he attained samadhi. He chopped wood. If we can do whatever it is we're doing, moment by moment, then we can, with love, with an attitude of service. I was looking at this sign that they brought from the farm today. You'll all see it when you go out there. It's such a beautiful sign about why we might all feel such great energy and inspiration to go help and harvest at the farm. But they don't say, come on, because all this stuff really needs to be picked, and if we're not out here, what'll happen to it? They have this whole list of things. What does it mean to do seva? What does it mean to serve alongside of each other? What does it mean to help feed your guru bhais so that when you're at that farm picking lettuce or cauliflower or whatever it is, you are doing such a great thing. And as long as we hold it that way, that is exactly what it is. There is no deed that is too small to take us further and further in the direction that we all want to go, if we're doing it with an attitude of wanting to move into the light. There is nothing we can do. If we're moving unconsciously, then we get to stay unconscious. If we're chopping wood and we're really irritated with somebody, well, in just that moment, you can see what it felt like. But if we're chopping wood for the love of God, if we're picking plants that way, if whoever stayed and vacuumed this carpet last night did it with that attitude, then they were moving into the light. Then we see that it's intention, that we need to keep serving in that way. And every one of our actions then is blessed by God. Our job here is to keep reminding ourselves, as I said earlier, that we need to wake up. You know, I thought one of these days I'm going to have the chutzpah, that's a Yiddish word that means guts, to walk out here and just say right out loud, right from the beginning, what Lahiri Mahashaya could get away with, because of course he was an avatar, and what I probably couldn't get away with because I'm nowhere near that. No matter what people came to him about, no matter what, his response was do more kriyas. And I want to say, as I said before, for those of you who aren't kriyabans, meditate a little more, no matter what. And as silly as it is, the longer I'm on the path, the more I really understand or know to be true what he was saying. It sounds like such a simple statement. But if our job is to wake up, if our job is to remember who we are, if our job is to be expansive and loving, where else are we going to find that but in this spine, where every moment that we meditate, every moment allows energy to flow more freely. And it is, I will tell you, the only thing that does that. Yes, we can move closer. Yes, we can move more towards the light with any deed if we do it to God. Ultimately, we have to meditate more. And even if it's 5 minutes, you know, I've been reading Sister Gyanamata's book, God Alone, again, getting ready for this sadhaka training book. My goodness, she was Paramhansa Yogananda's most highly evolved female disciple. And he gave her the job of counseling and communicating with everybody. So this is a book who Master inspired to write these letters, and it's a book filled with these letters to both Master and to everybody else who had questions. It is such a beautiful book. But she said, it is a blessedness in life, her words, to even want to meditate. That's what she said. Of course, very reminiscent of Master's saying, it is very, very, very good karma to even want to know God. It is a blessedness in this life to even want to meditate. And we might say to ourselves, what's 5 minutes a day? I always tell people in Med 1, I tell them all the time, if that's what you can do, do it. If what you can do is pronam in front of your altar at first, and that's all that you can do, do it. Think about the millions of lives that we've had already that have brought us to this church. Think about it. Think about how far we've come then to want to meditate. No wonder she said that. It's a big deal to want to do that, to want to be here, to spend 5 minutes, because how else would we know who we are? How else can we keep reaching out, stretching ourselves in that direction? Remember what Master said, God watches the heart. So every time our heart is in the right place, in ways that we can't imagine from where we stand, that beautiful loving energy comes and helps us move further than we could ever go on our own. I wanted to just read, to finish, a couple of lines from Whispers, Master's prayer demands, poems to God, because the poem Samadhi came to me this morning, because I often think to myself, the difference between living a life that's ego-centered and holding on the way we all do to those little bundles of self-definition, as Swamiji said, and the life that's soul-centered is not as great as it looks to any of us. People say to me all the time, well, how much time does it take? It takes no time. It's not about time. It's about stepping into the light right now. And then we're there. And I often imagine those curtains that are just like white sheer curtains. And I've often thought to myself, it's just that simple, stepping from here to there. We just move those curtains aside. So that first line of Samadhi came to me, which is, vanish the veils of light and shade. Vanish the veils of light and shade. And I thought, how wonderful. I've always had in my mind that it's just the thinnest veil. And I love knowing that I was even using the same word as Master used. But here, Master has said we should all memorize this poem and say it all the time. And because saying it all the time takes us further than wherever we are. No matter how many times we've said it, saying it the next time takes us further. This is how we all move down the path. But I thought, okay, what about those of us who can maybe meditate for 5 minutes or pranam in front of our altar? What if we're not ready to sit for hours a day the way some of the great people are? So what if we can't memorize Samadhi and say it all? So I'm going to close now, and I'm going to leave you with just the last 4 lines of Samadhi. They are so beautiful. So memorize them. 4 lines, not the whole poem. That's a challenge. Although do that if you can. Master said take 1 or 2 lines at a time and memorize them. This is not to discourage anybody from doing that, but this is to encourage all of us to do something so that our deeds and our intentions are completely in line, and soon we remember that we were a thought in the mind of God that was made manifest, and that we want to keep all of our thoughts in the place that we would love to see it manifested in ourselves or in somebody else. Spotless is my mental sky, below, ahead, and high above. Eternity and I, one united ray, a tiny bubble of laughter. I am become the sea of mirth itself. A tiny bubble of laughter. I am become the sea of mirth itself.